Hello and welcome to this mini lesson from inside the PE portal. Today we are going to be discussing obesity. Now first thing you need to know is that obesity is above 30 on a BMI reading or a BMI score. Now how do we actually arrive at this score? We have a person's weight divided by their height squared. So their weight divided by their height squared. Now if this number comes out as being above 30, then we would consider them to be obese. Anywhere between 25 and 30 would be overweight. Anywhere between 18.5 and 25 would be normal. And then anywhere below 18.5 would be underweight. Okay, there's extremes in both other directions, but that's where the majority of the population falls when doing this calculation. The next thing in the same breath I want to say is that this is not the most accurate thing to do. So not the most accurate. Why? Because it only takes into account two things: weight and height. For a person whose weight is comprised of muscle mass, mm, suddenly they're going to be appearing to be overweight, obese or more because of the amount of mass that they have distributed over the height of their frame. So a big thing which comes into obesity as well is a person's body composition. Body composition being the ratio of fat to muscle to bone to everything else, so other tissue. Now what you need to know this as is fat mass and fat-free mass. But BMI indexing, body mass indexing doesn't take into account the difference in the mass makeup, in the body composition. So someone who is muscular might come out as being overweight or even obese, despite them being in good physical condition for their specific sport. But for today and for obesity, we can term it as being above 30 on the BMI score test, or by having too much or excessive fat mass in their body. So what can cause obesity? We look at some of the causes. Well, it could be medication. So if someone is on a course of medication, it might deter them from moving. It might cause their body to retain nutrients, perhaps water, perhaps fat, and then that would add up to a higher weight. Therefore, if they were to do the BMI, then they might score above 30 and be considered obese. But the main cause is lifestyle. And by lifestyle, we've got two different things of energy in and energy out, also known as energy balance. Now, if someone remains out of energy balance or in a positive energy balance, whereby more is coming in compared to how much is going out, then gradually that excess energy is going to stack up inside their body, and they're gradually going to become heavier and heavier, with more of their body mass being contributed to by fat mass. So energy in versus energy out. But medication can also cause extra retention of nutrients, which might lead to greater weight gain, and it might deter someone, or it might enable or disable someone from moving as much as they could do. So there are some of the causes. Now, what are some of the effects? What are some of the negatives involved with obesity? We've got increased risk of coronary heart disease. So the vessels supplying the heart with the essential blood, oxygen, nutrients, they can become clogged, they can become damaged. As a result, the heart might start to suffer. We have an increased risk of cancer. So too much fat can actually cause cells to replicate themselves too quickly As a result, mutations can start to happen inside of those cells, and that's how a cancer can start to form and then spread. So excessive multiplication of cells, of splitting and replication of cells, as they start to spread and develop, mutations are more likely to happen as more of that replication occurs. We have the mental side effects. We could have depression. If someone does not feel good about the body that they're in, they don't like how it looks, they don't like how they feel, they don't like how out of breath they might feel with the drop in components of fitness, which I'll go into in a moment. But if they're less able to move as well as they once could, if they don't like how they look compared to how they once did, or they don't like how they look and move and feel compared to other people, which is a big issue at the moment with body image between Instagram or social media or the role models which are put up on a pedestal, and they might look different to how some people in this situation might look and feel, that can cause them to feel depressed. Components of fitness might start to take a hit, which we'll talk about in a moment. And the last one, my pen doesn't run out, which it has. Isolation. A person who is feeling a little bit depressed, a person who doesn't feel up to much, they are less likely to go and mix and socialise and put themselves out there, particularly if a form of meet-up is physical activity. Meeting someone for a game or sport, a round of golf, a gym session, a walk in the park. If they don't feel capable of doing that, then they might avoid it. If they don't feel good about how they look, they might avoid being seen by other people. And then that isolation could drive this depression even further, and it might start to bring on other social issues, such as communication problems, nerves, anxiety, and things like that. The last thing I wanted to look at was actually linked to muscle mass up here, but I will take that away, is the impact on performance. So sport performance. So someone who is moving into the obese category due to body fat, not necessarily muscle mass, they're going to have reduced cardiovascular capabilities. They've got more fat in their body, which is going to require a greater percentage of the blood supply, meaning the working muscles don't get as much. Those working muscles are also having to work harder to carry the extra mass, the fat. So the muscles are working harder on less oxygen supply and nutrient supply because of this extra fat mass. Now, because these muscles are working harder to carry the extra mass, they're also going to be slower. The speed of a person is going to be impacted. The amount of time it takes them to cover a distance is going to increase because the muscles, which have got less nutrients, are working harder to move more weight. There's a greater resistance for them to overcome. So of course the speed is going to take a hit. Agility will also decrease. If someone is accumulating fat mass on their upper body, this is going to raise their centre of mass up from the ground. Now, centre of mass, that can be a huge factor when we talk about stability and changing direction. If you've got a high centre of gravity or a high centre of mass, and you suddenly try to change direction, that centre of mass is going to want to go one way, and you're going to try and run the other. So that's going to inhibit your muscles from doing what they're trying to do, which is apply force in a new direction. So, reduced cardiovascular capabilities and endurance, reduced speed, reduced agility, and lastly, reduced flexibility. Fat mass that might be accumulating around a joint can start to restrict the range of movement. Flexibility being the range of movement available at a joint. If my arm tried to bend and there was a section or a segment of fat, as that arm compresses it, it's going to restrict the movement. Now, it doesn't have to necessarily be the elbow, but it could be perhaps around the hip joint, where fat that accumulates around someone's stomach, if someone tries to lean over, the fat gets in the way, and suddenly hip flexion can't occur as it could in someone who was not obese. So, quick recap. Obesity, defined as above 30 on body mass index readings. How do we arrive at that? Weight divided by height squared. This is not the most accurate form of fat testing though, because it doesn't actually take into account the difference in fat mass, muscle mass, bone mass, tissue mass, anything. So people with a high muscle mass and low fat mass could appear to be overweight according to this, but for your average person, it does an okay job. Roughly speaking, obesity is just too much fat on your body. What can cause it? Some medications can cause it, but it's normally lifestyle factors. Energy in, consumption, overconsumption of certain foods and too much fat, too many calories, and then energy out. How's it being expended? Is this person leading a sedentary lifestyle? Are they being physically active? Probably not. What are some of the risks, the downsides? Coronary heart disease, increased cancer risk, increased risk of depression, drops in components of fitness, and potentially isolation. They won't want to go out and meet up because they feel depressed about how they might feel and look. Sport performance, cardiovascular endurance, speed, power, agility, flexibility, they all get impacted. Therefore, sport performance will likely decrease, which could fuel further mental issues. And that is that. So I hope you found that lesson useful, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next one. Bye for now.